started with just introducing a little bit about the Student Climate Challenge. So we do have Ed Podesnak here from New Jersey League of Conservation Voters, and we'll do a nice intro in just a little bit. But I want to make sure that everyone here is aware of the rules and just the gist of what the challenge is. So the challenge is open to students in grades 6 through 12. That's public schools in New Jersey. We want to keep the actual individual teams down to 2 to 12 students, and there can be multiple teams at the same school. That's not an issue. And the whole point of this project is to complete a school or community project that addresses the human causes of climate change or the impacts that it has on the environment. And we would be judging a digital story video that students will make together. If you have any, anything that you want to learn about making a digital story video, we actually have a recording of a webinar that we did a couple weeks ago that goes through everything that you would need to make that. And that will be on our YouTube channel, and we'll send out those links soon. So this is just a timeline of how the challenge will go. We have all this month, we have educational sessions. So that's both student sessions like this, explaining, more in depth on specific issues related to climate change. And then we also have professional development for teachers. So April 1st is going to be when the submissions are due, and May will be when we will announce the finalist. And then, very exciting, we will have an awards ceremony at the Drumthwacket House hosted by Governor Phil Murphy and First Lady Tammy Murphy in June. And that is where we will present the awards for first, second, and third place. And as you can see, we have very generous awards that can be used to implement some of these projects or even go further on your campus to be more sustainable. All right, and then I'm going to do a quick intro to our guest. So Ed is the executive director of the New Jersey League of Conservation Voters. That's a nonpartisan organization whose mission is to elect environmental champions and support laws which protect our environment and improve the quality of people's lives. A consummate environmentalist, Ed has written extensively about the need for clean air, safe drinking water, and open space for all New Jerseyans, no matter their zip code. He has been published in the Star Ledger and other publications throughout New Jersey, with articles focusing on the pending Build Back Better Act in Congress and New Jersey LCV's impact on crucial elections. In addition to his work at New Jersey LCV, Ed is also chair of the New Jersey Keep It Green Coalition, New Jersey State Lead for the Coalition for the Delaware River Watershed, a member of the Rutgers Glee Club Alumni Advisory Committee, and a member of the board of Sustainable Jersey. He also serves as a council member in Franklin Township in Somerset County, where he was a former president and member of the school board. Born and raised in New Jersey, Ed grew up fishing, swimming, and boating in the waters of the Garden State. As a young man, Ed worked alongside his brothers in his parents' small business manufacturing life-saving communication devices for first responders. And then Ed worked his way through Rutgers University, earning a bachelor's degree in chemistry and a master's degree in education. So after a decade in the classroom teaching chemistry, Ed sought out an opportunity to improve education and environmental policy and was awarded a highly competitive Albert Einstein Distinguished Educator Fellowship to serve on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., where he crafted policies designed to improve our nation's health and competitiveness. So we're very excited to have you here, Ed, and we're excited to hear how students can get their voice heard.
Well, I appreciate that. Thanks, Joanna, for the introduction, which was very gracious, and for everyone being here. Appreciate your time to talk on this important topic, which is, how do you get your voice heard in the political system? What can we all do to influence the policies around us? And I think there's a lot of opportunity to discuss that. First, let me just start out by saying what we're going to be talking about today, which is a little bit of background about our organization. And then I think the best way for us to understand or help you understand, or for all of us to understand better what we can do to influence the policies, is to talk a little bit about what we're doing right now to influence policies. So I'm gonna present to you some of the issues we're currently involved in, federal legislation and state legislation around environmental issues. And then I'll wrap up with some pointers about how to talk to elected officials and decision makers. And then there'll be an opportunity to answer questions that you might have, really about anything environmental, whether it's issues or about contacting elected officials. So I look forward to that opportunity to have that conversation. And let's talk a little bit about who we are at New Jersey LCV. So you see 4 logos up on the screen. New Jersey League of Conservation Voters is made up of 2 main entities that are distinctly separate, but kind of operate within the environmental protection arena complementary. Okay, they're not coordinated, but they're complementary. One is an environmental nonprofit. It's called a 501c3. It's tax deductible, and it does public education and outreach, and it can work on legislation. And the other is not tax deductible, can do the things the C3 can do, but can do something else, which is it can actually endorse candidates for election. So say, hey, this person is good on the environment and this person is bad if they're running for the same office. And then we have 2 other entities, a political action committee and an independent expenditure committee, which actually can spend money to elect the most environmentally responsible and greatest environmental champions. So we're not going to talk a lot about the election piece right now. It's a small piece of what we do, but it is a way for us to hold elected officials accountable. If they promise during their campaign to do something to protect the environment, well, when they're up for election again, if they've been a failure and they've done things to pollute our air or water or our land, there is an accountability opportunity for us with the New Jersey League of Conservation Voters to not support them again and maybe get somebody else in there new, that is would be our hope, who will support the issues we care about. And so working in those elections is one aspect of what we do. The rest of what I'm going to talk about today is all in the public education, elected official education, and policy space. Lobbying your legislators, which is all out of our education fund. It's the New Jersey LCV Education Fund. So that's a little bit about who we are. One of the things that we hold true for us is to bring people together. We play a major convening role for the environmental community and beyond, other stakeholders like folks in labor, folks in faith community, churches, and other houses of worship, bringing together folks from local communities, particularly communities of color that have been disproportionately negatively impacted by a lot of environmental degradation and policies that put pollution in communities that were already congested and burdened with pollution. And now we see communities of color with higher asthma rates, with higher incidence of cancer, health disparities that are quite significant because of all the location or co-location of these burdens. So let's dive right into the first policy that I want to share. And this is happening right now. You might have heard about it. It's gone under a couple different names. It's at the federal level. It's an initiative called the Build Back Better Act or Plan, otherwise known as Biden's climate plan. It was originally called the American Jobs Plan. We have been working, New Jersey LCV, with a number of partners to push this legislation forward at the federal level. This framework will set the United States on a course to meet its climate goals, which would be 50 to 52% reductions in greenhouse gas emissions below the 2005 levels by 2030. So ultimately, you all know this because you're smart, but humans produce carbon dioxide through combustion, and that's a greenhouse gas that's responsible for warming our planet, causing more disruption. It's one of the major greenhouse gas contributors. There's others like methane, which is 20 times more potent, but in a lot smaller volume, so the impact is not as great. So what a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions is going to help us to slow the rate at which the climate is changing. And the goal overall across the country, but also internationally, is to keep that at a rate that'll really help us survive. So it's very, good for our planet, it's good for our people, but it's also about our survival. All of us saw what happened in Hurricane Ida. We have seen reports of what happened in Hurricane or Superstorm Sandy. We're seeing more intense and frequent storms. This Build Back Better bill will have $550 billion in total climate action investments, which is the largest ever single investment in our clean energy economy. So that's across buildings, so how we heat and cool our homes, transportation, so that's our cars, buses, trucks, and how we get our electricity, including other things like agriculture, which is a very energy intensive process, and climate smart practices for our lands and waters. So, trees help to produce oxygen that we breathe. They take in the carbon dioxide. So having more forests or reforesting land can be a great way to combat climate change. Oceans produce more of the oxygen we breathe than the land. So what happens in our waters are really important. And Build Back Better is going across that whole spectrum, from your own home straight through to the big, massive ocean. In addition, it creates a new civilian climate corps that'll enlist a diverse generation of New Jerseyans, conserving our public lands, bolstering community resilience, that's protecting us from climate change, the impacts of climate change, and then also what we call mitigation, or addressing climate change itself, preventing it. And it's doing all of these things while putting good paying union jobs in reach of many New Jerseyans. So here's the current status. The bill passed the House last fall, and now it's being negotiated by the Senate. And while the whole legislative process can be messy, we're fighting to get the bill passed because we know that it's important for our future and the future of the US, and quite frankly, your future. So it's great to have young people here with us because we're handing the keys of our planet and the environment we have over to you, and then your children and children's children. And Build Back Better is critical to ensure that we have a climate that we can live and prosper in. So that's a big factor. So after the Senate votes on the bill, any changes that they make will be reviewed by the House one more time, and then the House will have to concur with the bill again because changes were made, and send it to the president's desk. So that's a bill. So I gave you a little bit of background about it, and then I also described a little bit of the legislative process. Now, just in fairness, my background is in chemistry. I had a brief stint working for a member of Congress on Capitol Hill for 3 years. And all of the history that I learned and civics, I had to relearn in the practical application, because often what you see in the books isn't always what happens in reality. But the general sense, and we have a little bit of a slide on this, but the general sense is for a bill to become law, the two chambers of the legislature, so at the federal level, the United States House of Representatives and the United States Senate, have to pass the exact identical bill. When that happens, it cues it to go to the president for signature, and the president can either sign it or veto it. In the New Jersey legislature, that happens similarly. The Assembly of the state of New Jersey and the Senate of the state of New Jersey has to pass the exact same bills, and then they go to the governor, and the governor can either veto or sign it. The New Jersey governor has an added benefit. He can do something called a conditional veto, which is like a big amendment that he can make and send it back to the legislature, and they can agree with it, and then it becomes a law immediately. Or he can just outright veto it, or he can approve it as presented. The New Jersey governor is the most powerful governor in the United States, has more appointments than the president of the United States. And one of the powers of this conditional veto and the line item budget veto is rare in states across America. So anyway, we can go to the next slide. So, why should we care so much about what happens at the federal level? Well, between 2010 and 2020, New Jersey experienced 23 extreme weather events, and they cost $50 billion to our businesses and our families. where the most recent towns throughout the state experienced extreme flooding due to increased stormwater. And the reality is that that's going to be our new normal as we continue to suffer from more frequent and intense storms due to climate change, and more people along the coast will be relocating as sea levels rise if we don't do something. So I know there's some folks here from Highlands. No, this is really important. You know, there's a hilly part of your town, but you're right along the water. And you know, the work that we do to prevent climate change has you in mind, as well as the entire beautiful New Jersey shore, which is an icon for us. And across the country, in addition, we see our pipes and our treatment plants aging. Polluted drinking water is making its way into homes. And it's estimated that 6 to 10 million homes in America are receiving drinking water through lead pipes and service lines. So this is from the street to the house. They used to use lead. And over the next 20 years, New Jersey drinking water infrastructure alone will require $8.6 billion in funding. For decades, the infrastructure in New Jersey is suffering from a lack of investment, and New Jersey's infrastructure rated on a report card D+ for its infrastructure grade. So there really is a need for funding from Build Back Better here in New Jersey. That money is going to make its way to invest in our community. At the state level, some of the things that we've been doing revolve around a campaign or an effort we call Green in 21. So we've talked a bit about the actions happening on the federal level, but what we really want to do now is dive deeper on what's happening here in New Jersey with environmental policy priorities at the state level. And in 2021, the New Jersey LCV Education Fund launched an initiative in collaboration with our partners called Green in 21. The goal was to create an environmental policy guide and agenda that basically outlines the environmental needs for our state. And it creates, it creates a game plan that the governor and the legislature can follow. And I would also add, at the county and at the local level, there are actions that can be taken there as well. And the result was we came up with a broad and holistic educational compendium, which illustrates environmental and public health issues, equity challenges facing New Jersey and our communities, as well as policy opportunities that lie ahead. And this incredible education document is centered on 4 themes and has 8 sections. Altogether, it has 77 white papers written in about a page and a half each. This is for elected officials, so they tend to be like briefer than books, although many volumes of books could be written on any one topic. It's 140 pages, and altogether there's 371 recommendations for laws that could be adjusted and things that could happen to make our environment cleaner. At the center of all the topics that are discussed are equity, justice, public education, and jobs. And we did this in strong partnership. And I think, Rebecca, maybe you could put in the chat a link to it at some point. It's available online. You can sort it by topic. It's a really good way to come up on different issues as they face the state. One of the ways we were able to accomplish such a massive undertaking and to come up with those recommendations is to do it in with partners. So we work with over 25 different organizational partners, which each brought their own expertise and perspective to the policies. And it was really amazing to have groups working in the justice community, community-based organizations, health organizations. We had student organizations, labor, civil rights groups, all working together to have their voice be heard to put together the recommendations. And they come in 2 buckets. So far what I've talked about is legislation. So at the federal level, Build Back Better is a legislative vehicle. So we call it a vehicle. It's kind of weird because you think of vehicles on a car, but it's actually carrying the policies. And there's a lot of visuals. If it gets passed in the House and it drives across to the Senate, it's passed in the Senate, it changed, and it drives across to the House. And then the House passes it, it would drive over to the White House to get signed. That's the vehicle. That's the legislative branch. There are 3 branches of government. There's also the executive branch. That's the governor at the state level and the president at the federal level. There's a 3rd branch of government, which is the judicial branch, which we're not going to be talking about today, which kind of rectifies when laws or the executive branch is out of step, and a whole host of other things that we care about. So our point was to put together recommendations that the governor could do on his own through executive powers, and the legislature could do with concurrence of the Assembly at the state level, the House of Representatives at the federal level, and then the Senate at the state level, New Jersey State Senate, or the Senate at the federal level. And our guide is focused at the state level. So I would really encourage you to take a look at those. We have a tracker that measures how good folks are doing at those, accomplishing the goals that we set out there. So in addition to that, we then distilled all of these recommendations, over 200 of them, down into something we call a common agenda. So the common agenda is our priorities that we and our partners put together and what we want to see happen in the New Jersey State Legislature to pass over the next 2 years. And we broke it down into a number of different sort of pillars. The first is the built environment. And the built environment is important because how we build things and what we do in the things we build can make a big difference on how much pollution we're emitting and how much we're contributing to climate change. So one of the priorities that we've set is, you see this picture here, it's like, looks kind of gross, but what it is that's a concrete plant. When you see a sidewalk, when you walk on a sidewalk or a curb, foundations of buildings, high rises, all built with concrete. Concrete is a big contributor to carbon pollution, and that is a greenhouse contributor. So we're supporting legislation to reduce carbon pollution from homes and businesses with low embodied concrete. It's called a Low Embodied Concrete Leadership Act. So that's one component. And we think we can do this through an incentive. It's not necessarily a mandate. We can give people tax credits and some other things like that. And then through public contracting, when the government says we're going to build something, they can actually be leaders and step up and do it in the right way and can help to drive a whole new economy around low carbon concrete. And it's very exciting. It'll make a big difference for us here in New Jersey. Additionally, we have legislation that we're supporting to electrify new residential households. So many homes are heated by diesel fuel. We also call that home heating oil. It's very similar in its properties to jet fuel. We always think of jet fuel as something a little bit different, but they kind of all are in the same way. That's a really dirty oil, produces a lot of pollution. We call them co-pollutants, not just greenhouse gas pollution, carbon dioxide, but other things that cause the soot, why people have to clean out their chimneys, et cetera, or why we have staining around the tailpipe of a bus. We think we should end natural gas hookups by 2030 in New Jersey for new residential construction and have those houses be run all on electric. So they don't have to burn any fossil fuels. They're more efficient and economical, meaning they save money over the fossil fuel counterparts. No surprise right now, energy prices are going up. There's a conflict in Russia with Ukraine and things are happening. So that means all the fossil fuels that people are using to heat their homes are going to see an increase. With electric generation from wind and solar, we will have stability from those international and sometimes national kinds of market forces around the fossil fuel industry. So it's really good for our economy, but it's also good for combating climate change and improving public health. So that's a major priority for us. How do we build better? And how do we take the things that we're building and get them to be electric, running off renewables? If we go to the next slide, a big part of what we're doing is in the clean energy area. So climate change is real. It's caused by humans. Humans are amazing. When they cause a problem, they can actually solve it when they put their mind to it. When we put all of our efforts and row in the same direction, we can save the bald eagle and other challenges that we have had in the environmental space. So our clean energy commitment is to codify New Jersey as a 100% clean electricity standard by 2035. That would match President Biden's. Currently, New Jersey, the governor has committed to 100% clean energy by 2050. So we're kind of shrinking that back by 15 years, accelerating the pace at which we're getting there. And then in addition, we've got a priority here around ending diversions to the Clean Energy Fund. So right now, every homeowner pays a little fee to something called the Societal Benefits Charge. And it's a fund that's collected at something called the Board of Public Utilities. And then they take that money and they create incentive programs. One of them is a $5,000 rebate, up to $5,000 on electric vehicle. They're rolling out a $500 rebate on electric charging for home chargers. But they have other things, weatherization, tax incentives, rebates for Energy Star appliances. Under previous governors and through to this governor, some of those funds have been diverted to other things to plug holes in the budget that are not related to clean energy. And roughly around $80 million right now is being diverted. And so we have a priority, and we think it's really important that that money goes to reducing greenhouse gas emissions, to reducing pollution in communities of color, and investing in clean energy solutions for our future that will get cars off the road. Transportation is, we're going to talk about next, is 50% of the greenhouse gas emissions of our state, roughly. And so we need that money to incentivize electrifying our public buses, our school buses. And those are all programs that go through the BPU. So ending those diversions will be a big win for investments in our local communities and cleaner air and combating climate change. So we go to the next slide. I already preluded here, electric school buses. So transportation is 50% of our emissions. We want to ensure that communities have accessible and modern public transportation options. So the Northeast Corridor train line, it's electrified, all the whole way. It's not burning diesel fuel to get those buses, those trains into Manhattan, et cetera. The Jersey coastline, not so much. Those are diesel trains. And we have that happening all throughout the state where we have hardly any electrified lines. We also have our buses that are running people around the state because our trains are only in certain areas and they are not plentiful, and they're also running off of fossil fuels. We want to electrify those. We want every school bus in New Jersey to be 100% electric. The cool thing, and I'm going to mention this to you because not enough people are talking about it, is school buses are an amazing investment for our communities to electrify. They're big, they require big batteries, and school is only in session 180 days. We put in the calendar 184 of the year, which means the times when it's not running, when the school buses aren't running, they can serve as reserves for storing solar power so that at night, because there's no sun, that can go back to the grid, or wind power for days that when it's windy, it stores it up a lot, or high demand air conditioning days in the summer. It's called vehicle to grid technology. So we don't just charge the bus, we allow the bus battery to electrify our homes and businesses as well. And we need to be prioritizing that as well. And we have a real focus on the last mile. So folks can get on the train, but then how do they get from the train to their house, that last mile back, or from the bus depot to their house? And there's micro mobility options as well. It's different. Sometimes, in like New Jersey, we are the most densely populated state. We build in places where we maybe shouldn't be. We build in ways that leave us open to the hazards of a changing climate, rising sea levels, more intense storms. So we need to build a New Jersey that's more resilient. And one way to start to figure out where that is updating something called the State Hazard Mitigation Plan and incorporating into that climate impacts. It hasn't been updated in quite some time, and it ignores climate change. So we might say build a normal foundation at whatever inches above sea level. But we know sea level is rising at a certain rate. So in 20 years, that's not going to be to be safe and habitable in the future. So we want to also develop a program at the DEP to provide funding to municipalities that explore something called a stormwater utility to invest in stormwater infrastructure. And what a stormwater utility is, it is a way for a community to charge for hardened surfaces like concrete and pavement and then use the money that is being collected to create infrastructure to mimic nature. We never be as good as nature. My dentist reminds me that about my teeth, but we can mimic nature with green infrastructure and plants to absorb water like a sponge and clean it up. And that's important because we're seeing more flooding. And because New Jersey is the most densely populated state, we have more higher density of concrete and pavement than any other place. So we need these utilities to create investments that'll help reduce the pollution and protect the community into the future. So that's another big piece. And then lastly, I've said it a bunch of times, in open space and public lands, we're the most densely populated state. So we are focused on making sure we continue to have access to parks and open spaces. So we need to, big thing that's happening now, a lot of people ordering online, online markets. So we're seeing a lot of warehouses pop up all over the place. They're big. They're required to be solar ready. They're not required to actually have solar panels, although they're a great spot for it. So we need to rein that in and make sure it's happening in a way that's responsible, that we're redeveloping areas. We're not cutting down trees to put in warehouses, that the trees were carbon sink. They were also helping us to reduce warming and providing clean air for us. And then we're just putting in a warehouse that's just a warehouse. Like, we need to do something different here. So that's one of our priorities. And then overall, we need to make sure there's more funding for parks, for maintenance and accessibility, particularly getting parks within a mile of every home, and particularly in our urban areas that it's walkable. So those 5 pillars have lots of policies under them. All of these we're going to turn into executive actions, so rules that get changed or laws that are going to get changed. In the last 2 legislative sessions, so in New Jersey, a legislative session is 2 years. We just started our newest. In the last 2, we have passed 5 out of 5 of our legislative priorities. So those are bills into law with 100%. 2 sessions ago, the last session, and we're on track now to launch another set of 5 bills to pass in the next 2 years. And I want to get a good grade. I like education and all of that, but more importantly, when we get these things done, we're protecting the environment in ways. We banned neonicotinoid bee-killing pesticides. We advanced appliance standards to save folks over $130 million a year on electricity they're not using. We spurred electric vehicles in a big way through the incentive program and electrifying all of New Jersey transit buses, putting in a requirement, and a whole host of policies that we supported in the last session. And so that's a preview of what we're going to do coming up. And then in addition, I talked about federal legislation that's available and that we're pushing at the Build Back Better. So we're pretty busy. And I will just mention before I tell you how you can get involved and then take some questions. One, all of this takes money. I have a job, I get paid. It's wonderful. It's very enjoyable. There's about 20 of us that work at New Jersey League of Conservation Voters and its education fund. And Build Back Better in New Jersey to pass the legislation and get members of Congress to understand the benefits and a community to create what we call the political will, which means they voice their opinion and share that with their elected officials. In this case, for Build Back Better, the House of Representatives and the states and the senators at the federal level, Bob Menendez and Cory Booker. We spent about $3 million in engaging the public around the bill. So that's big. And a lot of it was TV ads with the guy's name, like a voice really deep, like, we want good jobs and clean energy. We can probably have played it here, but this moving legislation and protecting the environment costs money. We have to invest money because on the other side, the fossil fuel companies, they have very deep pockets and they're spending lots of money for the business as usual model that works off profits. So we need all the help we can get. And that's where we get to the next slide, how you can get involved. No matter what you do, if you decide to be an environmentalist, if you decide to be a lawyer, if you be an artist, you can always be involved in the public policy arena. If it's on environmental issues, if it's on other issues you care about. I was on the school board, I'm a local council person. There are lots of ways. The best way is to speak for yourself and tell your story. So what's happening in your community? what are some of the solutions to the problems you've identified? There's nothing more persuasive than a person sharing a personal story and asking for help to someone who ran for office to help people. You can also join us to advocate for our legislative bills or other organizations where you like their agenda. When you get a chance, you should register to vote, and you should vote, because who's in office matters. The people in office make decisions about what policies to support and what moves through the two chambers to the president or governor for signature, or what they do on their own through executive powers. You can also get involved in political campaigns. You can volunteer, make phone calls, knock on doors for our endorsed candidates. We have something called our activist program, where we train people to be voices of change, to advocate with elected officials. So you can join our activist program, and we'll share all of this as well. A really effective way to get the attention of an elected official is to write a letter to the editor, explaining something you want to see them do, and challenging them to rise to the occasion and do it. You can make financial contributions or raise money for organizations. I'm on the board of Sustainable Jersey. I'm a big supporter there. Whatever you can do to help, because like I said, it costs money for us to do the good stuff. And then the most accessible is to form a relationship with your elected official. And it says legislator here. So every legislative district in New Jersey, there are 40 of them, has a senator and 2 assembly people. You should know those individuals' names, and you should try to meet them. In addition, you have a mayor and a township council, and you should know those folks. And you should take a moment to get to know them and ask them for things that you care about, or let them know what you care about, or think about a policy from our guide or from Sustainable Jersey that you want to see, and write a letter to them and say what you want them to do and why, and give them your contact information and say, we'd love to talk to you more. And what you're going to find is you'll see results. We know that by being active and involved, so few people actually reach out, it really makes a difference. So if you want to find your legislator, here's a link in the PowerPoint, which we can also share. It's really exciting to have this opportunity to talk about climate change and a host of environmental issues that are out there that need support to get done. I think the future is brighter than the past, and we have an opportunity to do that, but it just takes hard work, and we can use your help each step of the way. So that rounds out my formal part of the presentation. If you want to contact me, I'm available at ed.potosnik@njlcv.org. That's our phone number at the office. I'm also on Twitter and Facebook. It's just Ed Potosnik. And I'll see if there's any questions here. Let's see.
And someone messaged me a few questions.
Okay.
Somebody's asking, how do I know if my elected official is good on the environment?
That's a great question. So you can actually, I don't know if you want to end the screen share. I don't know how it's controlled to do that, but you can actually go on our website. For the New Jersey Assembly and the New Jersey Senate, we make vote recommendations on every piece of legislation that comes before the elected officials at that level. We send them an email, what we want them to do, say yes on this bill or no and why, and then they can talk to us. And then we put out a scorecard that ranks how good they are on the environment. And that's available at www.njlcv.org/scorecard. And you can look where you live. It's an interactive map, and see your senators. There's a Senate pane, and your assembly people. And then you can see how they did on each bill. So like a thumbs down is red. They didn't vote the way we wanted them to. Thumbs up, it's green. They did something good on the environment. And then we give them a percentage, and we track their lifetime score. And so, definitely check that out. And if they're not good on the environment, there's 2 reasons. One is they hate the planet and our health, or the other is they just don't know how to be good on the environment. They don't know that you care. So I would encourage you to not look at that score and then say, you know what, I'm never going to talk to them. They don't like the environment. How can we help them move along and become more supportive of the issues we know we need. And that's where your voice is really important. There was any other questions?
What are some recommendations for students on writing an effective letter to the editor to get the attention of policymakers on climate change issues?
Yeah, so letters to the editor basically are very short. I want to say 150 words is about how long they need to be. So you want to make sure, and first of all, they publish a lot of them. So writing it is probably the hardest part, and finding the email address of where to submit it is the second hardest part. And we can help provide a list of resources if that's of interest. We do have a list of how to contact your local newspaper or newspapers that serve your area. And then in writing the letter, you want to know exactly what the ask is. And what the ask is, what are you asking whoever to do? So acting on climate change. Okay, you can keep it generic or you can keep it really specific. We want you to provide $10 million a year in funding to electrify school buses. Because when I go to and from school, I can smell the diesel and it's gross, right? So that's the ask. And then I also mentioned the why. So why are you asking for the thing you're asking for? So tell them what you want at the beginning. I'm writing, this is what I'm asking for, $10 million for electric school buses. Why? Because they stink, they're dirty. We have to tackle climate change, pull a couple things. And then how it affects you. If you can tell a personal story, it really helps. And then repeat your ask at the bottom again. And that's an effective way to do it. That's the advice. It's the hardest two things. One is actually writing it. And the second is finding the email to submit it. But they're effective. Everyone has Google Alerts set up with their name in it. So if you name your legislators in there, that's going to be even better. So let's say, for example, I think Highlands, you've got, at least I know it's Senator Gopal. So you would say, hey, Senator Gopal, please support $10 million for electric school buses. His staff and him are going to get an email as soon as that thing is published, and they're going to click on it and they're going to read it, maybe in the morning commute or something else. And they're going to say, oh, these young people, they have a need and I could help. I got elected to office because I want to help people. Let's look into that. And before you know it, you could have good stuff happening just because you wrote a letter, and maybe even sponsoring a bill that doesn't exist. So you can think of new ideas as well. There's a question here too. Can you talk about key environmental issues for local governments? Local governments, so New Jersey has 565 municipalities, 21 counties, and then the state government. Local governments control a significant amount of money and have what we call home rule, the ability to weigh in on a number of issues and effectively change policies to impact climate change. So I'll give a perfect example. I talked about water. With more frequent intense storms, we're seeing more flooding. In my town, in Franklin Township, we have some of the strongest stormwater ordinances in the country. So particularly in the state, I think we're just up where Princeton is. But we have a lot of we have a lot of water around us. We're not a coastal community, we're inland, but we're surrounded by the Millstone River, the DNR Canal, and the Raritan River. And so when we have weather events, we have lots of folks that get taken, impacted. They're impacted. So as we build, we have made stricter requirements for how much runoff can leave the property and make its way into those waterways, so that as new things are being developed, they're not making the conditions of flooding worse. Additionally, our rules are very strict when you do an addition or make a modification or add more what we call impervious surface. This is a surface that doesn't allow water to go through it. It's impervious to water. Concrete is a great example. Although there is a version of concrete that allows water to go through it, there's also a version of pavement that allows water to go through it. But mostly the traditional ones are impervious. If you have 1,000 square feet, which is a small amount relative to other towns of impervious, you need to start putting in stormwater mitigation plans and rain gardens and different things like that to clean up the polluted runoff and hold on to it. and absorb it like a sponge in a natural way, so it doesn't make its way into the rivers and things. So that's one example. Another way is in the energy space. Right now in amount of renewable energy that we're using from solar and wind above what the state is requiring at this time. I think the state's at like 5 or 6%. They want us to be at, I think, 50% right now. So that's a big increase. And so right now the township council is engaging on what that would look like. Energy aggregation is when we have 62,000 people in Franklin, 22,000 households. The municipality negotiates directly with the utility, with energy providers on behalf of the 22,000 households to get a lower rate with more renewables. So it's like a win-win for everybody. So that's a policy at the local level that can happen. Additionally, the best place really to look for local actions is going to be Sustainable Jersey's website and all the actions they have. I noticed somebody's here from a green team that's working with the school. The Sustainable Schools program also has very specific actions. And what's awesome about how Sustainable Jersey does it is it's like a menu. Not every shoe fits every foot. So you can pick through all the different strategies, what's doable in your town at this time, and then start to plan for ones that maybe down the road can be added, and we can have more and more protection. So it's really well outlined. But municipal governments, county governments, they make a lot of decisions that impact the environment. You know, everything from where they get their energy, if they're building with solar, to policies that direct new construction or renovation, in addition to a whole host of other things. There's another question here from Andrea, or could be Andre, I'm not sure. Are there online resources to learn more about suggested ideas for what to ask for from policymakers related to upcoming legislative votes on climate action, like the suggestion of $10 million for electric school buses? Well, I happen to know that bill is happening right now, and we supported it. Rebecca, who's kind of behind the scenes and putting some stuff in here, is our policy associate. She's doing a fantastic job, put together our agenda with partners. She put a link to that, our common agenda. This is going to have specific bills that we're supporting. And it's a great way to follow what's happening in Trenton and see if you can join in on anything. Additionally, I would say, if you join our email list at NJLCV, we will keep you up to date with bills that we're supporting and ways to be involved. You can, click to action and send an email to your senator or assembly person, and we'll give you their phone number, et cetera. And that's as things are coming, because sometimes we plan on things we're supportive of, and then bad things come and we have to try to stop it. So there's a little bit of a opportunity there. I would say definitely join our email list. We send about an email a day. So we're trying to be respectful, but there's just a lot going on and a lot of ways that folks can be helpful. And I think that rounds us out. I don't know if there are any other questions.
I think there was one more. What
Okay.
kinds of things should I study in college if I want to get involved in this as a career?
It is a great question. So I can tell you, study what you love, do what you want to do, and where your passion is. And it seems kind of hokey and generic, but I'll just share my own personal experience. When I was a little kid, if you asked me really up until high school graduation what I wanted to do, and then when I was little, I mean like just starting to walk and talk, my parents say like, Eddie, what do you want to do what do you want to be when you grow up? And I would say a lawyer. And I have no idea. I just wanted to be a lawyer. And then when I got to college, I went to Rutgers. I signed up for pre-law, which is like a whole bunch of curriculum around that. But I was really good at math and science. And my brother was an engineer. And so he told me, you should take the math and science classes as like a backup. It's good to have them. You like them, you should take them. So I did, all the way up to multivariable calculus, calculus 4, intro to biology, intro to chemistry, et cetera. I just took the math classes, but I really wanted to be a lawyer. And it turned out I really wasn't so good at the law stuff. And it was kind of upsetting to me. Like I was getting C's. My writing skills were not good. My ability to comprehend the literature that we were reading, a lot of philosophy, et cetera, which I didn't know how it related to law, but it was part of the coursework. It was a real struggle. And so after 3 years of kind of continuing dual track, science and this pre-law sort of more liberal arts, I made a decision to switch. And I, in my junior year, switched to become a chemistry major and a biology minor. And that's when I actually started taking all the hard science courses, and my GPA shot up and everything was great. I didn't realize until later in life that I was dyslexic. And so, reading the volume that was required in that area was just hard for me to keep up with. So needless to say, I went on, I became a high school, I became a chemist. I was doing synthetic organic chemistry of natural products. And then I felt like I had a little bit more personality than for the lab. So I left the lab to become a teacher. I did that for 10 years, which I loved very, very much. And then I got kind of frustrated with the policy. No Child Left Behind was coming out. They weren't testing science. So I went to Washington on this fellowship, and I learned about public policy and lawmaking and rules and regulations, and decided that I wanted to do that. Then I actually ran for Congress in 2010 to be an elected official and sort of change things. I was unsuccessful. And then I started this job, which applies my science and my environmental skills. And now I'm not a lawyer, but I do help write and pass laws. So it's really interesting how that kind of came around in a really different way. And in my career, it's funny to call it a career. I've just done the things that I liked, that were a good fit, and I felt joy from. And in the area of environmental protection and environmental science and policy making, there are a lot of avenues on how to be effective. We have a lot of lawyers we work with that love the environment and are very effective at making strong environmental policies at the local, county, state, federal level. I have a lot of environmental friends that have degrees in science or science, that have learned the legal political world and are very effective. So there's a lot of options, and even in the arts, that does not close the door to being a good advocate for things you care about. We all can read about the issues and become very studied. We can learn about the processes. When we're motivated by the work that we do, and it's a good fit for us, when the two things line up, then that's where the results happen. And I think you get a lot of joy. And that's what I found in the work that I've done. So I don't think there's any right answer, I guess is my point. And if there are stumbling blocks along your career, you wouldn't be doing or pushing yourself if you didn't have them. That's normal, and that's to be expected. And that means you're alive. That means you're not safe and comfortable. You're trying to grow and develop, and that's to be expected. And take those as a badge of honor, and know that you can overcome those challenges. I do a lot of reading. Dyslexia is not a thing that stands in my way. Helpful to know I have it. And I found a lot of success. It's just part of who we are, and we all have different challenges. And I encourage you to follow your passion, and put your best foot forward. When you get knocked down, get back up, and you'll continue, I hope, to find joy and pleasure and good income and life sustaining value from work along the way when you're following those sort of parameters. Any other questions?
I think that's all we have for questions, but thank you so much, Ed, for everything. I think that was a really great rundown of what students can do if they're interested in doing a climate action project on something that engages their legislature. So I am just going to wrap us up real quick by sharing a little bit about what's coming up after this. So actually tonight we have our student action panel, which is going to be really exciting. We have a bunch of students representing 3 different organizations that are completely student-led and work on a statewide level. So that will be tonight at 7 p.m. We have a PD coming up next week about integrating climate change into your curriculum. So that will be really exciting. And then we have, if Andrea, you want to share the bit.ly link, all of these resources will be there, and as well as all of the registration links and recordings of all of our past sessions. This is just a brief reminder for teachers. If you have not registered already, please do so. This allows us to kind of send out any resources that we come across, any rule changes for the climate challenge itself. And registration does not mean that you have to complete and turn in a project. So it does not hurt to register. And right here, we just have a few of our socials that you can follow us on, as well as that bit.ly link again, which is in the chat, and our email. So that email will also be listed on our website. It's NJ Student Climate Challenge at sustainablejersey.com. So it can be a little bit tough to remember, but it will be on the website, and you can reach Renee, me, or Andrea specifically from that email. Let me just, yeah, so we have Ed's email and Rebecca's email in the chat and that bit.ly link. So keep in touch with us, and I'm really excited to see what your students turn in for the climate projects. All right, have a great day, everyone.
Take care. Thanks so much. Be well.